Hi everyone. So today I'm reading chapters 14 and 15 of The False Prince. I hope you enjoy them. All three of us shared the afternoon history lessons, which was a waste of Tobias's time because he already knew the answer to every question. He spoke so quickly there was no point in Roden and I even attempting to speak, even if we had known the answers. Our history tutor was Mistress Havilah, who Tobias said had taught him other lessons earlier that day. She was past the age of marriage, which was curious because she seemed like a pleasant enough person. She had a round face with curly black hair that bounced a lot and made a great effort to avoid any discussion of the real reasons why Connor had brought us here, even though it was clear she knew. There was a nervousness about her, yet her easy smile and gentle nature were a welcome respite from the serious demeanor everyone else on this estate seemed to have. I wondered what would happen to her at the end of these 2 weeks. When she stepped out to ask for a drink of water, I told Tobias and Roden of my concerns. Tobias shrugged it off. She'll be fine. She told me that Connor asked her never to talk about teaching us. Threatened her, more likely, I muttered. Defensively, Tobias arched his head. If she doesn't talk, then it won't matter what Connor did. It always matters. I looked to Roden to agree with me, but his head was buried in the book in front of him as he tried to figure out the word at his fingertip. We all fell into silence as Mistress Havilah returned. Tobias lapsed into a sort of daydream until Roden and I failed to answer her next question, which he then answered without hesitation. Mistress Havilah was an excellent tutor, and by the end of the class session, we could all name the major Carthaginian cities and describe their contributions to the country. Fortunately for us, few cities in Carthia can be considered major, so it was easy to learn them. Unfortunately for Carthia, their contributions to the country are equally unimpressive. The new prince would need to work hard to build up production of our natural resources. Predictably, Tobias announced he was up to the challenge. Mistress Havilah raised an eyebrow at his words, but said nothing. There was a knock at the door, and 2 servants entered, carrying what I guessed was our lunch. I didn't know the first girl who entered, but the second girl was Imogen. She looked at me, gave her usual frown, then lowered her eyes. They set the trays down and left. Mistress Havilah placed the book she'd been teaching us from on her desk, then handed us each a meat pie wrapped in thick pastry. I ate mine in 4 bites and turned to Tobias, who was only halfway through his. Can I have the rest of yours? Tobias laughed, but I hadn't been joking. He finished the rest of his pie without answering me, while Mistress Havilah continued on. After our history lessons, Mott returned and escorted us to Connor's stables. Cregan was waiting for us there. His arms were folded so tightly as we approached. I briefly wondered if they were knotted. That's right, he said grumpily. I'll be teaching you to ride. After Mott was gone, he pointed to a saddle balanced on the top of a fence. Let's start here. This is what you sit on to ride a horse. You can't be serious, I said. Are you really going to treat us like it's the first time we've seen a horse? We can all ride. I don't know what your skills are, Cregan said. My skills are better than yours, I said. I can outride you with my eyes closed. Probably so can Tobias and Roden. Cregan's eyes narrowed. Better than my skills? I'm not just a rider. I'm a trainer. I break wild horses. And I can break you. I ignored that last part and said, I can ride anything you can ride. Cregan smiled. You won't bait me so easily, boy. Why not, Tobias said. If he says he can ride, why not test his skills? Cregan stared at Tobias, then me, then said, All right, wait here, and walked back into the stalls. Thanks, I said to Tobias. Tobias glanced sideways at me. I'm not on your side, Sage. Hopefully this will teach you a lesson. Our attention was diverted by a crashing sound in the stables. Slowly, I shook my head and mumbled to Tobias. You don't think he has an untrained horse in there, do you? Sounds like it, Tobias said. Can you ride? Roden asked me. I've ridden before. Is that the same thing? No, Tobias said flatly. I can ride, but I'm not stupid enough to challenge Cregan to a wild horse. Just apologize and tell Cregan you want lessons, Roden said. And let everyone hold that over my head, I asked. I'll just ride the horse in a circle or two. It'll be fine. Cregan was practically laughing aloud as he escorted a horse outside the stables. It was already trying to buck, and it was work for him to hold on to the reins. Cregan grinned wickedly. So you can outride me? I backed up 2 steps. My father had warned me about my quick tongue countless times. Perhaps he should have warned me more often. It doesn't matter whether I could beat you or not. You're the tutor here. That seemed to offend Cregan. His voice rose in pitch as he said, and as your tutor, I'm ordering you onto this horse. I shook my head. I'm not riding that horse. Get me a tamer one and I'll do it. You just know you'll lose if you play fair. Cregan walked so close I could feel his breath on me. Scared? Yeah, I was. It was a fierce horse. Then it's a good time to teach you some humility. Get on the horse or face the consequences. Leave him alone. Sage was just talking big, Rodin said. Cregan pointed a finger at Rodin. Sage won't help you in the end, boy. Don't you help him. Then he looked at me. If you don't ride this horse now, then you won't ride again during the next 2 weeks. I'll tell Connor you failed here. After a very long moment, I reached for the reins. Fine, but I need help getting up. Cregan laughed. Can't even mount a horse by yourself? It's a riding contest, not a mounting one. Where's your horse? Cregan's laugh widened. You'll fall off so quickly I wouldn't even have time to get into a saddle. He steadied the horse while I climbed on. The horse bucked, and I had to grip tightly to stay in the saddle. He doesn't like me, I said. You should be used to that, Cregan said, and Windstorm is a she. With a laugh, he slapped the horse on the back side. Windstorm took off with a fury at her feet, throwing me hard against the curve of the saddle. She bucked twice, and I managed to hold on only because it entertained the devils to help me do it. Behind me, Cregan was laughing boisterously. Maybe Rodin and Tobias were too. It was hard to tell with the world jostling all around me. I yelped and held on as she pulled free of Cregan's control, and we sprinted away. Windstorm headed directly for a tree, as if she knew the low-hanging limb would knock me off. I ducked in time to avoid the worst of it, though some of the smaller branches scraped my shoulders as we passed beneath them. Somewhere behind us, Cregan yelled for me to come back, but Windstorm was on a full gallop to freedom. Cregan was left with the reality that by the time he got a horse to follow me, I'd be long gone. And I was on a horse running so fast that if I fell off, I was facing more than a few broken bones, or worse. It was nearly dark before I heard them calling for me. I didn't answer the first few times. They weren't close enough to hear me, so there was no point in using up what little energy I had left. Finally, Mott passed close enough that I could see him through the trees. He was on horseback and carried a lantern. The devils have you, Sage. Answer me. Where are you? Over here, I called. I had hoped it would be Mott who found me. If it had been Cregan, he'd have likely beaten the last of my strength from me as punishment. But Mott seemed to hate me less. I might have a chance with him. He found me lying on the bank of the river, legs half submerged in the water. The water was cold, and my legs had gone numb long ago, but numb was preferable to the ache I'd felt before. Mott cantered over and slid off his horse. There you are, he said, sounding more relieved than angry. How'd you get so far away? Most of it was a blur in my mind, so I didn't bother answering. Mott crouched beside me. I told Connor he's a fool to consider using you as his prince. Princes ride in carriages, not on horseback, I said. As it so happens, a prince will often ride on horseback. Not with that horse. Mott grinned. No, not that horse. Where is she? Long gone. I can't even tell you which direction. Connor will be furious. He was going to have her broken soon. Are you hurt? I think bruises are the worst of it. She stopped to get a drink of water and I fell off. Mott chuckled. You stayed on through the ride and fell off when she stopped? Cregan's going to laugh all night about that. I rolled the rest of the way out of the stream and pulled my legs up close to me. Just tell him I stayed on through the ride, or he'll make lessons just as bad tomorrow. Sorry, but at some point you will have to learn that you can't say whatever you want to whomever you want. There are consequences for your sharp tongue, and this is one of them. I hope it will prove to be your most valuable lesson today. Valuable lessons were code words for pain that no one apologized for. I'd had enough of them for a lifetime. I'm cold. Can we go back? You've got a cut on your cheek. I brushed a finger over it, though in the darkness of the woods and with my dirty hand, it was hard to tell if there was any blood on it. It didn't feel wet. I think it stopped bleeding. Connor won't like that. He doesn't want to present a prince at court who's got cuts and bruises all over him. It'll heal by then. Mott extended an arm to help me onto the back of his horse. I stared at the ground for a moment, then looked up at him. I need your help, Mott. Connor's never going to choose me just as I am. Mott took my hand and lifted me up. Not as you are right now. Let's get you back and cleaned up. Did I miss sword fighting? We canceled it to look for you. What about dinner? They're eating right now. I can only imagine how Roden and Tobias will talk about me to Connor. It'll be a miracle if they didn't talk him into hanging me at his earliest convenience. Mott began riding us back to the stables. The springtime night had cooled, and I shivered in my wet clothes. Mott must have felt sorry for me because he spent most of the ride instructing me on how to manage a wild horse. Unfortunately, I had other things on my mind, so I missed most of the lecture. Too bad, because what I did hear actually sounded interesting. Then Mott asked, What's your interest in Imogen? I shrugged. Nothing. Why? She passed me a note earlier today asking me to stop you from looking at her, so I'll ask again. What's your interest? There's nothing, I insisted. It's just that she seems so anxious all the time. Is she safe here? Mott hesitated a moment, then said, When the servants feel one of them has been singled out or favored, they tend to get jealous. That can become dangerous. I pondered that. So you're saying when I look at Imogen, it makes things worse for her? It could, yes. Which left a horrible feeling inside me. I'd only looked at her to understand the cause of her fear, when in fact the cause of her fear was me looking at her. As we neared the stables several minutes later, Mott said, We were in a debate over whether you really can ride. Oh? Connor said he thought you could. He figured you had goaded Cregan into letting you have a horse so you could ride to your freedom. We weren't sure we'd see you again after tonight. I chuckled lightly. Yeah, that would have been a good plan. So can you ride, Mott asked? Or are you really so stupid as to have gotten on a horse that was bucking like that? My soft laughter widened. Then I grabbed my chest. It hurts to laugh. I must have bruised a rib. If you want me to tell you that I'm stupid, I will. The evidence is there. Mott shook his head. You don't have to say it, Sage. But you do have to get yourself under control. These 2 weeks are going by past fast, and you're far behind the others.